The distress signal came in short, erratic bursts, old, decayed, as though struggling against time itself. It had no business existing, not in this place, not from that ship. And yet there it was. Dr. John Mercer leaned over the terminal, watching the spectral data stream across the screen. He didn't need to turn around to feel the tension coiling through the control room of the Abyss Voyager. His team had gone silent. It wasn't the usual quiet of focus, of deep-sea precision. It was the hush of people staring into something that should not be. "It's an old maritime frequency," murmured Darius Ing, the ship's AI specialist. He tapped at the controls, running the signal through various decoding protocols. "Weak, but it's holding. There's some kind of interference." Leon Stokes, their engineer, let out a skeptical chuckle. "Interference? At this depth? From what?" No one answered. A grainy voice cut through the static, warped by age and distortion. "Please, trapped. God, please." Then the message collapsed into a wave of static and silence. Captain Naomi Reyes took a step closer, arms folded across her chest. "Can you get location?" Darius nodded. "Already on it." A beat passed before his expression darkened. "Coordinates place it here, in the North Atlantic, right above a deep trench." John knew what was coming next before anyone said it. Samira Vasquez, the team's marine biologist, leaned in, scanning the data. "That's impossible." Darius exhaled. "The transmission is coming from the wreck of the Andrea Doria." Silence pressed in. John stared at the data, half expecting it to change, for the machine to correct itself. But it didn't. The Andrea Doria had been lost in 1956, its wreck long since picked over by divers. There had never been a mystery about it, until now. Captain Reyes made the call. "We're going down." The Leviathan was unlike any submersible in history, fully autonomous when needed, capable of withstanding depths that would crush lesser vessels. Its sleek black frame and reinforced viewing domes made it feel less like a machine and more like an armored beast descending into the abyss. John sat beside Reyes in the cockpit while the others manned their stations, strapped in against the slow, deliberate pressure of descent. The first hour passed in darkness. There was something deeply unsettling about deep-sea exploration, the feeling of falling, knowing the world above you was vanishing into obscurity. A mile down, then two. The only illumination came from their own floodlights, sweeping over the endless void. Then, at 2,400 feet, the anomaly came into view. The ship should have been in pieces. It should have been skeletal, its bones picked clean by time and current. But the Andrea Doria loomed in the blackness, impossibly intact. No corrosion, no broken hull, no evidence of 6 decades beneath the ocean's suffocating weight. It floated there, as though waiting for them. Reyes swore softly. John didn't blame her. Darius, gripping his console, whispered, "How the hell?" "Bring us in," Reyes ordered, her voice steady, controlled. It was what a good captain did. Pushed forward, even when every instinct screamed otherwise. The Leviathan glided forward, scanning beams sweeping over the portholes. John swore he saw movement inside, shadows shifting just out of reach, but that had to be a trick of the light. Samira's voice was tight. No marine life. Nothing. She was right. Not a single fish. No scavengers. No silt drifting from the ocean floor. It was as though they had stepped into a photograph, a perfect still frame removed from reality. Nova, the onboard AI, chimed in, detecting abnormal energy signatures, gravitational inconsistencies present. Leon let out a nervous laugh. "That's new." Reyes ignored him. "We're going in." The Leviathan latched onto the hull with careful precision, its docking clamps securing against metal that shouldn't have been pristine. The airlock engaged, pressure equalized. John took the lead, stepping through the threshold into a corridor frozen in time. The air was wrong. Too still. Too cold. His boots echoed on the floor, the sound swallowed almost immediately. The others followed, scanning with handheld lights. The hull stretched before them in perfect preservation, as though the passengers had simply stepped away moments before. A tray of dishes lay on the floor, Soup still pooled in ceramic bowls. A suitcase sat open, its clothing folded with care, untouched by decay. "This isn't right," Samira murmured. John approached a wall-mounted intercom. The brass speaker was polished, no sign of rust. He hesitated, then pressed the button. For a moment, only static. Then, a child's voice crackled through. A whisper, quiet, urgent. "They're watching." The lights flickered. The corridor stretched, impossibly long, like something had shifted, bending time and space. A shadow moved at the edge of their vision, gone before they could process it. Reyes gripped her weapon. "We need to move." They pressed forward, deeper into the ship that should not have been. The silence felt heavier now, thick with something unseen. It wasn't just the absence of life, it was the presence of something else. Something waiting. At the far end of the hall, an open door beckoned. Beyond it, the ballroom glowed with flickering chandeliers. Tables stood set for a dinner that had never come, glasses filled with something dark, thick. And at the center of the room, standing perfectly still, was a man in a suit, his back to them. Leon exhaled sharply. "Jesus Christ." John stepped forward, the others behind him. The figure remained motionless. "Sir," Reyes called, her voice edged with caution. The man did not turn. The Leviathan's external comms crackled, but no voice followed. Then, slowly, the figure moved. Not turned, moved like a film reel skipping frames. A flicker of existence shifting too fast, too unnatural. When it finally faced them, the mouth was wrong, stretched in a silent scream, eyes empty sockets filled with darkness that went on forever. Then the lights died, and something breathed behind them. The darkness pressed in, thick and absolute. The lights of the Leviathan had died, leaving only the weak, flickering glow of their handheld lamps. John's breathing sounded too loud in the silence. Something had breathed behind them. He knew it, felt it. But when he turned, the corridor was empty. Leon fumbled with his flashlight, hands unsteady. What the hell was that? No one answered. The figure in the ballroom was gone. Only the space it had occupied remained, a lingering wrongness in the air, like an afterimage burned into their minds. Reyes steadied her weapon. "We move together. No one splits up." "Understood." The nods were hesitant. Fear had settled over them like a second skin. Darius tapped at his scanner, muttering under his breath. "Something's interfering with our equipment. Readings are fluctuating, gravity, radiation, everything's unstable." John barely heard him. His eyes were drawn to the far end of the ballroom, where a set of grand doors stood ajar. A dim, sickly light seeped through the gap. A whisper slithered through the air, too soft to make out. Samira shuddered. "Did you hear that?" Leon shook his head. "I didn't hear anything." John did. He wasn't sure whether it had been a voice or something worse. Something beneath the range of human perception, vibrating through the bones. Reyes gestured toward the doors. "We need to find the source of the signal. If we can figure out what's causing this, whatever this is, we can get out of here." John wasn't convinced, but he followed anyway. Beyond the doors, the ship was wrong. The architecture had shifted, bending into something that shouldn't exist. Hallways stretched longer than they should, angles twisted subtly, the doors they passed no longer matching the ship's design. It felt as though the Andrea Doria was shedding its disguise, revealing what lay beneath. Samira stopped suddenly. "The air feels different." John knew what she meant. The temperature had dropped. The air was stale, almost like the breath of something ancient and waiting. They reached a stairwell, its steps vanishing into shadows below. As they descended, the walls grew damp, pulsing faintly beneath their fingertips. The further they went, the more it felt like stepping into something alive. Darius's scanner beeped erratically. "I don't like this." "The readings are—" He stopped mid-sentence, eyes wide. John turned his flashlight toward the bottom of the stairs. The floor was covered in water, but it wasn't normal. It was black, viscous, rippling unnaturally. And in its surface, reflections twisted, distorted faces staring up at them, mouths open in silent screams. Leon took a step back. "That's not water." A wet sound echoed through the corridor, something shifting just beyond the light. Then the whispering returned, louder this time, words in a language none of them understood, crawling beneath their skin. Reyes raised her gun. "We need to turn back." The ship disagreed. The doors at the top of the stairs slammed shut with a deafening clang. The walls groaned, shuddering, as if breathing. The black water surged forward impossibly fast. Something was rising from it. John grabbed Samira, pulling her back just as a long, skeletal hand broke the surface. More followed, dozens, stretching, reaching, their fingers too long, too thin. Faces formed in the darkness, shifting and writhing, their features never settling. One of them spoke, a voice that was many voices, overlapping, ancient, broken by time. "You were not meant to find this place." Reyes fired. The bullet struck the nearest figure and passed straight through. The entity didn't react. It only smiled. The black tide surged again. They ran. The corridor twisted around them, stretching in impossible directions. The ship was folding in on itself, trying to keep them inside. John's heart pounded as they rounded a corner, only to find themselves back in the ballroom. Leon doubled over, panting. "That's not possible." Samira pointed to the intercom panel. It crackled to life, the same child's voice whispering through the static. "They are watching. They are listening. You have to leave." Reyes gritted her teeth. "We're trying." Darius checked his scanner. His face had gone pale. The energy signatures are intensifying. The ship, it's not just old. It's out of sync with time itself. John's mind reeled. That would explain everything. The Andrea Doria wasn't just a ghost ship. It was displaced, trapped in a state of existence that defied natural law. Leon backed away from the intercom. "Then how the hell do we get out?" The answer came with a deep, resonant hum. The ship trembled. Something was waking up. John turned to Reyes. "We need to find the source. If this thing is being powered by something, we shut it down." Reyes didn't hesitate. "Then we head to the engine room." As they moved, the walls continued to shift around them, fighting to keep them trapped. Shadows flickered in the periphery, watching, waiting. The ship was alive, and it was aware of them. When they reached the engine room, the door was already open. The space beyond was massive, stretching far beyond what the ship's dimensions should allow. And at its center, embedded deep in the machinery, was something pulsing with an unnatural light. A mass of shifting flesh, writhing, breathing. It turned toward them, and it spoke. The thing in the engine room had no true form. It was not flesh, not metal, not anything that belonged in a world governed by reason. It pulsed with a sickly light, its mass shifting, folding into itself like a living paradox. It did not breathe, yet it exuded a presence so oppressive that the air felt thick, heavy, filled with unseen weight. John could feel it inside his skull, an intrusive hum, like a thought that wasn't his own, whispering, searching. He forced himself to step forward. Reyes lifted her weapon, but before she could fire, the thing shifted. A sound erupted from deep within it, a guttural, resonant chorus of voices overlapping, ancient and wrong. It was neither speech nor sound, but something that bypassed ears and went straight to the mind. "You were never meant to see us." The words coiled inside their heads, crawling into the marrow of their bones. Leon staggered backward, clutching his ears. Samira whimpered, eyes squeezed shut as if she could will it away. Darius's scanner flickered wildly in his hands. The energy levels, they're surging. Then the thing moved. Tendrils of something not quite flesh lashed out. Too fast, too unnatural. Leon was yanked from his feet, dragged toward the writhing mass before anyone could react. He didn't even have time to scream. One moment he was there, the next he was absorbed, his form unraveling like loose thread, his body becoming part of it. Samira let out a strangled cry. "Oh my God, Leon!" Reyes snapped out of her shock. "Move! Now!" They turned to flee, but the walls of the engine room shifted, blocking the exit. The Andrea Doria was changing again, warping around them, trapping them inside its nightmare. The thing pulsed, its many layers of shifting mass splitting open like the unfurling of a grotesque flower. Faces formed within its writhing depths, distorted, frozen in agony. Leon's face was among them now. His mouth moved, soundless, his eyes wide with terror before his features melted away into the shifting hole. John turned toward Darius. "Can we shut it down?" Darius's hands were shaking, his mind racing. "It's not a machine, it's something else. But the energy, it's connected to the ship's structure. If we overload it," Samira gasped, pointing past them. "It's coming." Tendrils lashed toward them again, warping the space they occupied, stretching reality itself. They dodged, barely avoiding the grasp of whatever intelligence resided within that thing. Reyes gritted her teeth. "Overloaded how?" Darius's mind worked in panicked fragments. "We need to create an energy surge. Force it to collapse in on itself." Reyes grabbed her communicator. "Leviathan, respond. Can we trigger a power surge?" Silence. Then, static crackled. Nova's synthetic voice broke through, distorted but functional. "Captain, I have detected extreme, anomalous activity. Advise immediate extraction." "Extraction isn't an option." Reyes barked. "We need a power surge. Now." Nova processed for a moment. "Emergency systems can be rerouted to cause a directed overload. However, this will compromise Leviathan's power integrity." Reyes didn't hesitate. "Do it." A tremor shook the ship as Leviathan complied. The walls groaned, the floor beneath them vibrating with the force of the energy shift. The thing in the engine room let out a deep, resonating howl, not of pain, but of anger. It knew what they were doing. John grabbed Samira's arm. "We need to get back to the sub. Now!" The ship was falling apart. Hallways collapsed. Doors blinked in and out of existence. The air thickened, warping with heat and static as though reality itself was breaking down. They ran. Darius fell behind, his breath ragged. I can't." John turned back just in time to see something drag him away. A shifting limb, neither shadow nor substance, wrapped around his torso and pulled him into the darkness beyond the failing walls. "Darius!" John lunged forward, but Reyes grabbed him, yanking him back. "He's gone. We have to go." The horror of it barely had time to settle before the Andrea Doria collapsed inward. The hallway shrank, pulling him like a dying lung. The whispers grew deafening, screaming now, overlapping voices of the lost, the consumed, the ones who would never leave. John, Reyes, and Samira reached the docking bay, where Leviathan was still latched onto the hull. The sub's lights flickered, its systems barely holding on. Reyes smashed the controls, forcing the docking clamps to release. The hatch opened, and they threw themselves inside just as the last remnants of the ship imploded. The view from the sub was impossible. The Andrea Doria twisted, folding inward like a structure collapsing through dimensions rather than space. It flickered in and out of reality, parts of it vanishing into black nothingness while others stretched beyond comprehension. Then, with a final, sickening pulse, it was gone. Only the dark abyss remained. Inside the sub, the survivors lay sprawled, gasping for breath. The silence was deafening. John looked at Reyes. "Did we?" She didn't answer. Samira clutched her knees to her chest, shaking. "Leon, Darius." Nova's voice cut through the silence. "Hull integrity intact. Power at 30%. Awaiting orders." Reyes swallowed hard. "Take us up." The Leviathan began its ascent, carrying them away from the nightmare. But something lingered in the depths. John could feel it, a presence, watching, waiting. The Andrea Doria was gone, but whatever had claimed it wasn't. As they rose toward the surface, a final transmission crackled through the speakers. A whisper, "You were never meant to leave." The ascent felt endless. The Leviathan carved its way through the crushing darkness of the Atlantic depths, its engines humming in uneasy rhythm. John sat in the cockpit beside Reyes, his mind reeling, his body numb. Samira huddled in the corner of the cabin, arms wrapped tightly around her knees, staring at nothing. They were alive, but that whisper still echoed in John's head. "You were never meant to leave." Nova's voice broke the silence. Approaching surface, preparing for atmospheric transition. Reyes exhaled, long and slow, gripping the controls like a lifeline. We make contact the moment we breach. Get picked up and never, never come back here. John wanted to agree, but something gnawed at him, a sensation just beneath his skin, an itch in his skull. It was as though something unseen still clung to them, something waiting. Then the sub shook violently. A high-pitched alarm shrieked through the cabin. Nova's voice clipped with static. Warning, gravitational anomaly detected. John barely had time to register what was happening before the Leviathan stopped descending. Or rather, something held it in place. Samira screamed as the sub began to descend again, slowly at first, then faster. The external cameras flickered, feeding back nothing but static and darkness. Something unseen, something unfathomable had latched onto them. Reyes slammed the manual override, her fingers flying across the controls. No, 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 we're not going back down. But the ship did not listen. The darkness outside the viewport deepened, growing heavier, thicker, as if the ocean itself had become sentient, wrapping itself around them like a coffin. The depth gauge began spinning wildly, numbers increasing in impossible increments. They were going deeper than the ocean floor should allow. John gritted his teeth. Nova, emergency power to thrusters. Burn everything we have. The engines roared, heat flooding the cabin as every last ounce of power surged through the sub. The Leviathan trembled, metal groaning under the strain. Then, the blackness shattered. Not water, not ocean, not space. They breached something else. The moment they crossed the threshold, the screens flickered back to life. But what they saw was not Earth's ocean. Not anymore. The Leviathan hovered in a vast expanse of nothing. Not water, not sky, just an endless horizon of black, speckled with floating wreckage, ships, planes, fragments of vessels from every era, trapped in a void outside of time. Some were intact, others torn apart, their insides spilling into the abyss like disemboweled beasts. And in the distance, the Andrea Doria, perfect, untouched, awaiting its next passengers. Samira sobbed. No, we made it out. We made it out. John forced himself to think, to breathe. They were trapped, caught in whatever cosmic snare had ensnared the others. They had escaped the wreck, but they had not escaped it. Nova's voice was eerily calm. Temporal displacement detected. Location unknown. No navigational data available. Reyes gripped the console, knuckles white. We're not staying here. A movement caught John's eye. Through the viewport, shapes began to stir. Figures moved within the floating wrecks. Shadows with eyes like dim lanterns, mouths stretching open in silent, hungry anticipation. They had been here too long, too deep. They were part of it now. One of them raised a skeletal hand, beckoning. The whisper returned. Welcome aboard. Reyes didn't hesitate. She activated Leviathan's emergency self-destruct. John turned to her in shock. What the hell are you doing? Her eyes were hard, filled with something beyond fear. Resignation. We're not becoming part of this. Samira sobbed. We can't. Reyes grabbed John by the collar, forcing him to meet her gaze. I'm not going to spend eternity floating in this nightmare. John saw it then, the grim reality. There was no leaving. The ship had never been a ship. It was a trap, a lure cast into time itself, pulling in those unfortunate enough to listen. We were never meant to leave. The countdown began. 10 seconds. Through the viewport, the figures pressed closer. 9. The Andrea Doria seemed to shift, its hull stretching toward them, the impossible gravity of it pulling them in. 8. The wrecks around them groaned, moving as though alive. 7. John closed his eyes. At least we'll go on our own terms. 6. A final voice crackled through the comms. Familiar. Darius. 5. John. 4. You never left. 3. The sub jerked violently. Reality itself snapping like a rubber band stretched too thin. 2. The darkness collapsed. 1. John woke up. The sun was bright. Too bright. He was standing on the deck of the Andrea Doria. But it was 1956. It was whole. It was beautiful. Passengers bustled around him in elegant evening wear. The ocean stretched out, perfect and endless. A little girl tugged at his sleeve. She had Samir's eyes. "You're going to be late for dinner, sir." John turned, his heart pounding. He saw Reyes among the crowd, smiling, laughing with a glass of wine in her hand. Darius leaned against the railing, watching the waves as though he had never been lost. The ship's horn boomed, signaling the beginning of something inevitable. John turned toward the horizon, but there was no horizon, just the deep, endless black. He felt it then, the whisper curling around his mind. "Welcome aboard."